is March 17th, 2026, and I am Pastor Robin from the Spooner Church of the Nazarene. I'm here with Brad today. We're going to be sharing Brad's spiritual testimony. So we're just going to start right out by asking you to tell us a little bit about yourself prior to, actually, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you're doing in the church.
Okay. Before I get started with that, I guess the first thing that I'd like to start this with is just, why am I doing this? And I think that is part of an important thing for me anyway to do, because when we go back and start looking at where I've come from, this is not in my wheelhouse. This is not something that you would have ever got me to do. No matter how persuasive you might be, it probably wouldn't happen. But it's now where I'm as far along in my journey with Christ as I am. It's something that I know I have to do. And it's not like anybody has to twist my arm. I might act like that sometimes when people ask me to do something. It's like, I just kind of might not be the first one to put their foot forward, but if I think it's something that God is calling me to do, I don't have a choice. This is not an option. This is something that I need to do. So, having said that, why am I doing this? I'm doing it because I am changed. I am not who I was. And I want anybody that watches this, if there's anything that comes out of this, I want you to recognize that this is real. And that my life is changed, and that I owe Jesus everything. And if you don't come out of this video interview, whatever we want to call this, with that, then it's missed its mark. And it's about Jesus. It's not about me. So this is not something that I accomplished. This is all Christ working in me. So again, just keep that in mind as we go through these questions. So back to where you started. Unless you want to ask something else.
Well, we're actually going to go. We have a list of questions.
Yep.
We're actually going to go down this list. We know what church we're recording this in. Talk about what church you're attending and how you chose it.
Okay, so I'm going to back up a little further than that. Hopefully, we're going to keep this fairly short because I know people aren't going to want to watch me for that long. But I came to Christ at a young age. And again, I can't give you the date. I know exactly when it was. I responded to an altar call at a church camp. I believe I was 12 years old. Changed my life, but I wasn't fully in. I kind of was 1 foot in the world and 1 foot in who my identity was in Christ. And I did that for a lot of years of my life. But after my wife got ill and I took care of her for about 2.5 years, I came to that realization I couldn't do that without Christ. And so I submitted to him finally, I guess is what I'll say. And having done that, I couldn't go to church in that period of time, but I started reading my Bible front to back. I was journaling, I was praying, and watching whatever I could on TV with different pastors that were giving messages, and you got to be careful with that. I'll just say that right out of the gate. However, I was finding my voice in who I was in Christ, not who I was in the world. And so after my wife passed, I immediately started looking for a church. I tried a few different churches, and nothing stood out to me as, okay, this is my church. Until I talked to my sister, and she said, is there a Nazarene church anywhere near where you're living? And I said, yeah, there is actually in Spooner. It's like 24 miles or so away. And she said, well, go back to your roots. That's where you came out of. So go back to your roots. And that's how I started this church in 2015. My wife died in November of 2014. And I believe I started coming to this church probably around March of 2014 was the first time I came to the church. And by the way, the reason this church stuck versus the others that I walked through the doors of is this is the most welcoming church I've ever been in. And that goes back to even, I had some great churches in Wyoming that my parents took me to, but this is like the most welcoming church I ever walked into. And therefore, here I am, still today.
What was your childhood Christian upbringing? Because you
Awesome.
had very godly parents.
Awesome. I had just awesome parents. I grew up in a different day and age, first of all. So as an example, just right out of the gate as a baby, I don't know how old I would have been. Probably we left the state of Minnesota when I was 5 or 6 after kindergarten, so probably 6, and moved to the state of Wyoming. But I achieved the perfect attendance for Sunday school. That was all my parents, believe me.
Right.
That wasn't because I got up and got dressed and went to church. It was because of my parents, and that's just the way life was. You went to Sunday school, you went to Sunday worship service, and then you went home. You had an afternoon of family. Mom and Dad did naps. It was like you didn't work on Sunday. Sunday night, you were back in church. Wednesday night, you're back in church. And they were wonderful examples of what godly parents should look like. And, you know, I thank God every day that I had that upbringing and that I had that, again, that example of what that looks like. I just wish I would have fully submitted earlier in my life so that I could have been a more complete husband, father in my life as well. But again, that's my early upbringing they worship leaders, Sunday school teachers, my parents did it all.
Now, your parents didn't just take any naps. They had a specific name for their naps.
I think naps were typically referred to as Nazarene naps. And I used to think, what in the world are they doing? What a waste of time. I wanted to be out shooting hoops or playing catch or something. I was an outside kid, really. But I'm here to tell you, at the age I am now, and I'm 72, will be 73 in a couple months, I'm into these Nazarene power naps. I have no complaint with them whatsoever. So I get it now.
Yeah. What about the teenage years, the wonderful teenage years?
They were tough. So for me, again, I came to Christ at 12, but boy, the teenage years get tough. And so a couple things I'll say. One, you start having this desire to blend in, and unfortunately, most of the world, even though I was, in a good church and stuff, when you go to school, you don't feel like you fit in necessarily. And so I wasn't super forthcoming with my faith or who I was, and I wanted to blend in and be more like the cool kids in school, which is a horrible mistake to make. And I don't think we'll have people watching this that are very young, but boy, I would recommend don't do that. So anyway, poor decisions. Started chasing worldly things through my teen years, and that carried over beyond my teen years. So I wasn't, as I said, I was living with one foot in the world and one in my identity in Christ. And Christ was there the whole time. It's just that I wasn't, submissive, and I was living a life that I knew was in some aspects a lie. I was trying to be buddies with, all the kids, the cool kids that were my age. And I never did fit in to either world then, which is a huge mistake in life. We have a hole in us that needs to be filled by God. And when you're thinking in terms of, I want to be like Jesus, I want to live that kind of life, but yet you're living like, the people in your life that aren't believers, you're kind of like lost. And you're trying to pretend both sides of that coin, and it doesn't work. I'm just here to tell you. Yep. You don't get true happiness, until you just say, I'm doing it the Christ way. That's it.
Most of us, when we go through our teenage years, we're not, it's not cool to be a Christian.
Mm-mm.
you
No.
know, and so
I always think back,
Wade.
I know my sister's gonna be watching this, and, you know, she had it tougher than I did, because everybody knew when she was going to school that her grandpa was a pastor. And so she's told me that how they just teased her, you know, almost the bully kind of thing in school, because they would say, they called her like a Jesus freak, and were you swinging from the chandeliers in church, and just, you know, just stupid things. But as a kid, those are not easy,
No.
you know, because again, you wanna blend in a little, you wanna be liked,
Yeah.
you don't want to be ostracized and thought of differently. But again, I should have learned more from that lesson early in life, because Jesus said, "In this world you will have trouble, but you know, take good heart. I have overcome the world." And I would have thought maybe if, you know, where I am today, I think less of, I'm not worried if I blend in or not.
Yeah.
I'm just going to speak the truth, and represent, you know, my God.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about your reason for surrendering was while your wife was sick, but what part of that specifically actually brought you to the point of that needing surrender?
It was, I think first and foremost, I wasn't submitted to Christ. Because if I had been going into that valley in my life, I would have turned to Him and relied on Him right away.
Yeah.
But instead, I walked into that with this idea that you got it. You can control this situation. You can somehow make this turn out okay. And I couldn't.
Yeah.
I just absolutely couldn't. And for those that don't know, we won't go into those details, but my wife, in addition to having cancer, which is what ended up taking her life, but she had early onset Alzheimer's that turned into a dementia. And she didn't know who I was. She knew she was married to a guy named Brad, but she didn't know that was me. And that brought a lot of conflict. And then, of course, in the early stages of that, the fixer, myself, was trying to convince her, no, I'm him. You know, you're wrong. And that is not what you want to do when you're dealing with someone that has that. And it took time before I finally figured out that there's a better way to deal with this. I don't need to be right. I just need to love and support and let her know that I'm here for you no matter what. And avoid the conflict side of it. It took some time there, but again, that's what I just finally hit that spot where it's like, I can't do this. I need help, and who better? You know, I finally went back to my roots, which was, okay, Lord, I give it to you. You know, your burden is light. And so I'm giving it to you. And boy, did He turn it around after that. In fact, I'll just add this one thing about that. Through the next couple of years of that, dealing with care issues with her, we grew closer in that period of time, which is God. That's strictly God that made that happen.
So you ended up actually quitting your job, taking early retirement to take care of her.
I did. I had not planned to retire till probably 65 or older. I had a wonderful job, and you know, I was at that point in my life where I could really start, you know, the 401k was looking pretty good, and the pension plan was there, and it was all about me supplying all my needs for my retirement. And then, you know, God worked this situation together for good, Romans 8:28, because He brought me to a point of dependence on Him and not back to, I got this. You know, if I work till I'm 65 or 66, man, I can travel the world, and I can do all these wonderful things, you know, or we can, because my wife at that point. But I knew I retired at 59 and a half because my pension was fully vested, and I was able to access, you know, the funding I needed to literally retire at that point. And boy, I look back at it now, and again, I wouldn't want anybody to go through what my wife went through or what I had to go through. But it's odd to say this, having come through it and seeing what God did, I don't know that I would go back and change it at this point. Again, I wouldn't want anybody to go through that, and I wouldn't choose it going into it, but he just made it all okay by the end of it. And it's only God that can do that.
Yeah. That's definitely part of his plan. I think your baptism, I love this about your baptism, the location of it.
Yeah. Yeah, actually, so when I started coming to church here, I hadn't been coming here that long, and Pastor Fraser left the church because he had a different call on his heart. And after he had left, we had an interim pastor that just came in for a few weeks, and we were going to do a lake service. I'd been to a lake service through the church, but it was at a lake up north somewhere. I don't remember where it was at. And so I was living at the lake yet at that point in time, and I said, well, we can do it at my place. We can have the lake service there. And then literally this pastor goes, I think we should do a baptism. If we're at a lake, we should do a baptism. And it was like, it just hit me all of a sudden, you know what? I want to do it. I want to do this. And so I got baptized right off my lawn in the lake in front of some neighbors. There were some neighbors across the lake that I knew were seeing what was going on. I thought, awesome. Yeah. And of course he asked me, so, what's your testimony for this? And it was all about, I think we would call it today christened as a baby in church. Mm-hmm. I don't know, probably by my grandfather, because he was a pastor. And I'm assuming that's, where I was as a baby. But bottom line, I wanted it to be my choice this time. I wanted it to be, I'm being baptized because of this new creation that I am today, being fully submitted to Christ and deciding I'm going to follow him. Yeah. So, yep, at the lake.
So now we're going to talk a little bit about your life since you surrendered.
Okay.
We're going to talk about family. I know you've got a wonderful sister and niece and nephew. Who is your biggest family supporter?
Ooh, I'm going to say my sister. There's others that support me a lot. I got to say my daughter Tammy does as well, but my sister. And again, if I'm going to, no disrespect to any other family out there, if you happen to be watching this, but there's something special about my relationship with my sister. She's always been there, even when I wasn't. And I look back, every now and then I bring a Bible to church. I've got multiple Bibles, but one of my Bibles she gave me, and I can't remember exactly how old I was, but it's got her signature in the front to my brother, Love, artist, my sister. And, we lived apart for so many years. And then when my wife got ill, I got back in contact with her, and she once again was just a shoulder that was there for me. And then, but I'll tell you, since then, we don't live next to each other. She now lives in Kansas, which is way closer than California. But I can talk to her anytime I want. I love technology today that gives us that ability. And again, number one supporter, I'm going to say my sister.
That's one part of your testimony that I really like, is how you went from, you said you weren't in any contact hardly at all.
No.
Maybe once or twice a year on a holiday or whatever.
Yep.
To now it's like almost daily.
It is. God restores everything.
Yeah.
It's just the way God works. My sister and I, so she's my next oldest sibling, but I came along late in my mom and dad's life. So there's an age difference between us. And so, I'll just give it, I think she started her senior year of high school when we moved to Wyoming, and I started first grade. And then, of course, it wasn't that long after that she was married and had moved on out of the house anyway. And then, of course, we started living in separate states. All that stuff was in between us. And yet God restored such a tight relationship there. And so, yeah, God restores everything. Not just a relationship with her, but even a relationship with, my daughter, which she's really my stepdaughter, but she's a daughter, period. Yeah. And did he bless me with that relationship in my life.
Yeah, we're going to get to that here in a minute, because I do want you to tell that story too. Actually, this is probably a good place to tell that story about bringing Tammy.
Okay, so I guess what I will say is this. I came into Tammy's life when I think she was probably 12, 13, somewhere right in that age time frame. And of course, I was younger than my wife, and so I was put right into a role of being a dad. And as I said earlier, I wish that I would have been fully submitted to Christ when I came into that role. Now, I had great parents that gave me a good example, and so I tried to live up to that, because that's the example I had. But I know I could have been so much better than I was. But at any rate, having said all of that, teen years, Tammy's teen years were pretty tough. And so I was in this role of, trying to keep a thumb on her and, control, which isn't, the example I had from my parents is when I made some poor choices. I wish I could have followed that better, but, especially when my dad in that case would sit me down and go, you recognize what you're doing?
Yeah.
And is this really the direction you want to go? And just super loving. And I unfortunately had a bit of a temper. And so I think I probably burnt bridges more than make bridges in those years. So we weren't as close as we could have been, or as close as I wish we would have been for a period of time there. But ultimately, after my wife passed, I'm journaling, I'm praying, and God just kept putting in my heart, you need to be in contact with Tammy. You need to keep working on that relationship. And so I did, and I'm not taking credit for that. Believe me, I'm not. That's Christ in me that did that. But I started doing my best at trying to be an example of what it looks like my dad and my mom, to put Christ first and live a life that, shows that, which is basically, as Jesus said, love God above everything else, and then love everybody else as you do yourself, or maybe better even than you do yourself, for me anyway. And so our relationship started to grow little by little, and then she got ill, and they found that she needed to have literally a new valve in her heart at one point in time. And I was already coming to the church here at this point in time, obviously, and but I was like, okay, this is serious. And I knew she, rightfully so, was fearful of what she was going into. And so I knew what, she was going to have surgery early in the morning in Eau Claire, which is like an hour and 45 minutes something drive. And so I got up super early to be there by 7 and, be in her room to talk with her ahead of time of the surgery. And when I got down there, I walked in her room and sat down, and the lights were out yet. They just had the low light, at the head of the bed. She was sleeping, and I sat there, and all of a sudden, nurses start popping in, lights are coming on, they're starting to poke and prod and do all of their things. And so when we had a free second, when everybody stepped out again, we talked back and forth, and I said, I'd like to just pray with you. And I don't remember if she said, would you pray with me first, or if I said it, but either case, I just said, well, we got a couple options. I said, we can just pray that this surgery goes really good, and that you come out and you feel better, and you're all repaired. Or I said, we can pray for that, but we can also ask that Jesus come into your heart and life, and you can make him your Lord and your Savior. And she said, I want that. And I did pray for her with that. And it was heartfelt. I knew it. And tears were flowing down our cheeks. Tammy, I'm not saying this to, you're not going to be embarrassed, but tears were flowing down our cheeks, and it was real. And if you could, well, those of us that knew her and know her now, again, not only God restore a relationship between me and her, but she has a relationship with Jesus now, and he has changed her life as he has done mine totally. So how do I know God is real?
Yeah.
Because I see what he does.
Yeah. how have your life goals? You talked about earlier about going after worldly material. Um, in what ways has your life goals changed since coming to grace?
How haven't they changed? Would be a probably easier question. So I'll just give you a quick synopsis. Um, Again, I was working and trying to put worldly goods away for retirement because that's where I thought my joy would come from. After my wife passed, I sold the home and I built a pole building and I built a tiny house inside of it. It's not that tiny, but 540 square feet or something like that. And I live a super simple life now. I got rid of a lot. I still have worldly goods, so I'm not going to tell you I don't, but I got rid of a lot of excess baggage, and I love a simpler lifestyle. And it's just, it takes away a lot of, well, basically I think what it did is it took that physical foot out of the world. Spiritually, I'd already stepped out of the world, but now physically, I'm not tied to all those worldly things anymore. And so, yeah, it's way better way for me anyway to live my life. It's simple, it's less clutter, it's easier to keep up. It's just better for me all the way around.
Yeah. We're going to talk about how your interests have also changed, and you have talked in the past about you were actually kind of a fanatic about football.
Oh yeah, if the Packers were playing, I was watching. Tammy could tell you, she could attest that my voice would probably get raised a time or two as I watched the games, and my Sunday schedule revolved around football. And that's just one aspect of my life. Again, a lot of, I was trying to fill a void in my soul with worldly things. And you can do that. I'm just going to say, though, it doesn't last. And the proof is in the pudding in that I have not watched a football game. I'm not saying that's bad if you do, go for it, whatever. But for me, there's better things that I want to do today than that. And again, I think part of that issue was I was obviously putting that ahead of coming to church or spending time in God's Word or anything else. I mean, and you knew it because if they lost, my mood was horrible the rest of the day and the next day too. And it would take like till Tuesday, Wednesday when I'd start thinking, okay, maybe next week they'll do better. And that was back when they lost a lot of games too, by the way. So yeah, and they still do lose a lot of games, I guess. I don't really pay attention, but that's a whole change in life, period. A better life now.
Okay, we're going to drop down here to, and I already know the answer, but they may not. But your favorite Bible verse and why?
Well, I got a lot of them, but I go back to Romans 8:28 almost all the time because I not only see it in my life, I see it in people's lives all around me. And I don't, a lot of times they don't even recognize it, but I see it. And we know that God works all things together for good for those who love Him and are called to His purpose. And so I see it in my life. I made a lot of poor decisions, but somewhere in there God was working those together for good. And I look back at my life and, I've told this story before, but, for early years, late teens and 20s, and it was all about, I had to have motorcycles and cars and snowmobiles and all of these toys. And, there'd be, I've had some wonderful vehicles. In fact, some that I kind of miss actually even, but I'll give an example. One of them in high school was a 57 Chevy 2-door hardtop, which today's market would be worth like $60,000 or something. I bought it for $500, actually $450 because it had a cracked window and she negotiated down. But literally, I had that car for about a year and a half and I lost interest and I had to have something else. That's the way my whole life has been, with one exception, and that's Christ. I can't get enough of Him, and he is there to give me more. It's up to us. Do we want more of Christ or don't we? Because he'll give it if we ask.
Yeah, we've talked about that before, that insatiable hunger
Yep.
for him and his word. We're going to finish this out with, and then I'll give you a minute if
Okay.
you have something you want to add. But what would you say to someone out there that may watch this that has not made that decision yet?
I'm going to say there's no other decision that amounts to anything other than, are you going to believe on Christ's finished work on the cross? That's it. We're talking about something that, from a worldly perspective, nobody can understand. And that's eternity. We are created in God's image with a soul and a spirit that'll live on forever. This body is failing, it's dying, I can attest to that. The age doesn't come easy, but we are going to live on for eternity. And where you live on for eternity depends on, are you going to believe on Jesus' finished work on the cross, or aren't you? If you don't, you're not going to like it. You better enjoy this life and go ahead, fill it with all these worldly pleasures, whatever that is, the things that don't last that I can attest to, or fill it with Christ. Believe on him and let him change you. You are a new creation, a new heart, a new mind. Are we perfect? No, we won't be perfect. Not on this side of heaven, but he is perfect. And when we try to live up or live like he would have us live, you're going to have a peace and a joy that are going to surpass anything this world can provide. So that's the most important choice you need to make.
Is there anything else that
Yeah,
you'd like to?
I'm going to add something. So, we started this, why am I doing this testimony? It's because, not because I enjoy sitting in front of a camera, it's because of him and what I owe him. He paid everything for me. He changed me in ways that are impossible. You can't do it on your own. Trust me, can't be done. Whatever you're going through, if you believe in him, give it to him, he's there with you and he'll get you through it. So why am I doing it? It's because of that. But I'm going to add this. I go, nowadays, a lot of things you can't buy locally, unfortunately. So you got to go online. And it's weird how whatever I buy, and I'm telling you, I can buy something from a pair of socks to, like, here a couple weeks ago, I had to buy a part to repair the toilet here at the church. And inevitably, when you buy that online, because that's the only place you can maybe find it, maybe socks I could have found locally, you'll get this thing in the mail or in your email that says, please rate your experience. And how did that part work for you, or whatever it is. I can tell you this, I bought many Bibles online because it's the easiest way for me to find them. Again, I can't go to a local store in my area and find a Bible for sale. So I go online and I find these Bibles. I have yet to get one, would you rate your experience of buying a Bible? Why is that? It's because the world, unfortunately, does not want to hear about Jesus. They just don't. And so they don't care what your buying experience was. At least that's my experience. Maybe yours is different. But I've never had one. For the number of Bibles I've bought for, just other people that have requested a Bible. So that tells me that I need to be proactive. I'm not going to wait for the world to come to me and say, how was your experience? I'm going to go to the world and I'm going to tell them how my experience was. And that's why I did this. If nothing else comes across, know this. This is real. This change is real. It doesn't come from any other source. And the world just can't believe it's that simple. We don't have to do anything. We can't earn it. We don't clean up first. We don't do anything other than say, Jesus, come into my heart and life. I will make you my Lord and my Savior, and I want to follow you all the days of my life. And when we do that and put him first, it's the beginning of a whole new life and a long, long eternity with him. So that's why.
That's why. Okay. Yeah, and I agree with you. We can't fake this. This is so real. Well, that is all the questions I have. If you don't have anything else to add, we will sign this out, but I do want to let you know that we are going to be doing these twice a month now. If you are a member of the church, if you come to the church for any of our programs like Celebrate Recovery, or whatever reason you step through these doors, just know that at some point you will be hit up and you will be sitting where Brad is sitting now, because we are going to try to do these twice a month from here on out.
Yeah.
So.
And by the way, have you done one yet?
Yes, I did mine with Cecilia.
Okay, done.
It was
All
a
right.
two-parter.
I won't
too,
give you any
so
more grief.
Yeah.
All right.
I don't have to do mine again.
Okay.
If you want, you can go back into the archives of the Splinter Church of the Nazarene and on the Facebook page, and you can find that where Pastor Cecilia from the Danbury Church and we actually did ours. Ours were so long though that we ended up going into a two-part show.
This one's getting long.
Yeah, it is, but that's okay. It's important. Everything that was said here today was important. So, I am Pastor Ron from the Spooner Church of the Nazarene. I want to thank Brad for volunteering. Well, he was voluntold, actually. He didn't really volunteer. What was it I said? I asked if you wanted to be a guinea pig, and
I think that's what you said.
You said something about.
Yeah, I think that's what you said.
And you said something about your inclination was more towards fear than whatever. Anyway, so we will see you on. I believe the next one will be on April 4th.
Cool.
So thank you for watching.
Thanks, Robin.